Welcome everyone. Welcome to Parent University for the class of 2022. We're going to go ahead and get started. Today is the first in a series of workshops designed to support you as you help your child navigate the college application process. My name is Tara Lodwig and I'm one of the school counselors. Like you, I'm also a parent of a junior in high school. So I totally understand the uncertainties and the questions you might have going through the college application process. Parenting is already hard, and parenting a teenager during a time of a pandemic doesn't make it easier. This year is like any other year, and it seems like there's a lot of unknowns out there and changes to the college admissions landscape. But we are in this together, and our student services team is here to support you along the way. Our goal with Parent University is that the more information that you have about the college application, the more confident you can feel in allowing your child to drive, hopefully making the process less intimidating and less stressful for everyone. That's our goal, less stress for everyone. All right. The general format, for those of you who have never attended a Parent University session before, is that we will go through a brief presentation of the day's topic and then open up the chat box for any questions you have. We are recording this presentation to be posted on our school's website, so please include only questions that or information that you're comfortable sharing with all. All right, so I'm here today with a team of 3 other presenters today. We're really excited to start off this Parent University program for you all. Some other counselors, as well as Mr. Stansberry, our Director of Student Services, may be joining us as well to support us during this presentation. But we're going to go ahead and get started, and I'll let the other presenters introduce themselves first. So, Ms. Hotel, do you want to introduce yourself next?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kathleen Otal, one of the counselors at McLean. For juniors, that's students with the last names DJ through HAL. We're looking forward to giving you this wonderful information, very important information today.
Hi, everybody. I'm Mrs. Venice. I am your college and career specialist, and I am an extra layer of support for all students at McLean, and particularly get involved as students are thinking about what they're going to do after high school. So I'm very excited to be with everybody today. I wish we were all together in the lecture hall, but this is the next best thing. And Mr. Olcott is here with us as well.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Greg Olcott. My alphabet for juniors is HAM through KA. This is my 5th year at McLean High School. Love being a Highlander, and I'm excited to jump into this presentation.
Absolutely, and I think I'm going to hop in and get us started here. We're going to talk about standardized testing today, and I first want to acknowledge that standardized testing right now for the current seniors is very different than in years past because of COVID-19. As you are probably very aware, or as you can at least imagine, many SAT and ACT tests have been canceled since March. And so our current seniors have had less of a chance to test. And so, and because this is a global issue, colleges are responding. By and large, colleges are understanding that the SAT or ACT, while historically have been an important component to college admissions, is less relevant this year. That being said, we don't know what this will look like for the class of 2022. And so I do want to acknowledge that while we're going to do our best to walk everyone through standardized testing and the landscape and options, we also acknowledge that things might change. They might change more in line with what's going on right now, and more colleges and universities might be test optional, Or our current juniors might have more of an opportunity to take standardized tests as our current seniors have, and then things might go back to the way they maybe looked like for the class of 2020. And so understanding that we don't have all the answers, we are going to try our best today to walk you through standardized testing. And so we're going to go through a very brief slideshow today. I want to just mention a few things. On your screen, on your left-hand side, there is a magnifying glass tool that you might find useful if you see something that's small text. I also want to just remind everybody that this session is being recorded and it will be posted, and we'll get that information out as well, especially for those who could not attend. And if you need to hop off for any reason, you can always catch up with the recording. And so for those of you who maybe grew up with standardized testing, a lot of this language might sound familiar, although things have changed over the years. If you took the SAT when you were in high school, it's actually been rewritten and changed multiple times since you've taken it. I know since I've taken it, it's been changed at least twice. And so while it is out of 1600, like it might have been when you took it, it's not necessarily exactly the same test. It has two sections. One section is worth 800 points, and it's the reading and writing component. And the other section is also worth 800 points, and it's a math component. There's an optional essay component that is not factored into the 1600 total score, and not many colleges require it. Some do. The ACT is a completely different test, and it's made up of 4 sections: English, math, reading, and science, plus an optional essay. And the sections all add up to a possible 36 points. And so there are some really helpful charts online that will tell you, okay, if you have X score on the SAT and X score on the ACT, which is the preferred test for that student. And so we'll walk you through some of those resources. Many McLean High School students with access to testing, so again, things are a little bit different right now, but in general, our students usually will try both of these tests to pick their favorite. And I'm going to talk to you about how to do that in an economical and low stress fashion. So US colleges and universities are accepting either the SAT or the ACT, or both. And so if you have a student who prefers the ACT, they should feel absolutely confident taking that test, knowing that they'll never have an SAT score, and that's okay. There are also going to be schools that are completely test optional, in which case if you have a child who does not enjoy standardized testing or doesn't feel like the scores they're getting when they practice really reflect how they feel about their ability in these subjects, then there are a lot of test optional schools as well. In general, we're going to recommend always checking with the admissions offices, really just checking the admissions websites for the colleges your student is interested in to make sure they're understanding what that school's policy is around standardized testing. Okay, here's another side-by-side for you in terms of looking at the different length of those two tests, the different sections of those two tests, how they're scored. I do want to make note here about the reporting of scores. And so when a student takes the SAT, when the student takes an ACT, they are told by that testing agency what their scores are, and they have full discretion and ownership over who gets to see those scores. So they get to decide whether or not they're going to send those scores to colleges. While they have the option before they sit down to take the test to request scores to be automatically sent to colleges, we don't necessarily recommend that students do this. Most students want to see those scores before they choose whether or not they're going to share them with colleges. Also, if a student is testing junior year, they have no idea what colleges they're going to apply to yet, and so they wouldn't want to send them randomly to colleges anyway. Some colleges are going to ask students to share every standardized test score that they have, and then that college says that they'll make the determination about which scores they'd like to consider. So again, every college is a little bit different. In terms of content, there are different sections for each. There's like a little bit of a different timing for each, depending on the question in the section. Calculators versus non-calculators. There's a lot of different components that what I would recommend, and we'll talk about practicing, but sit down with your junior and with this chart, and you can find similar charts online to say, here are the differences between the two tests, and they might have a sense of what feels more in line with their own academic leanings or skills and interests in terms of taking tests. At McLean High School, we offer the practice SAT, so we just hosted the PSAT for juniors. We do not offer a practice ACT, and so in terms of trends at McLean High School, we often see students, because they have a practice SAT under their belt, we often see them continuing with the SAT, although of course many students try the ACT as well. And so let's talk a little bit about how the colleges review these scores. I want to talk about super scoring. So again, some colleges are not even going to want to see test scores. Some colleges are going to let the student decide all about test scores and what they want to share. But if a student decides to share scores with a college and they send the ones that they want to share with those colleges, the colleges are going to consider the highest scores from each section. And so here's an example. If a student took an SAT in December, and they got a 600 on the math and a 700 on the reading writing, and then they take it again a few months later and get a flip of those scores, all of a sudden they have two 700 scores that when combined is a 1400. Then on each of those separate seatings of the test, they had 1300s. And so super scoring is something that is in the benefit of students, and it's a tool used by colleges acknowledging not all students are showing up to their test feeling strong in both areas equally. And so if they're going to take the time to prepare for the SAT or the ACT multiple times, the colleges are going to allow them to combine their best scores. You cannot combine from SAT and ACT, though. It has to be within the same combining SAT scores or combining ACT scores. Okay, so which one to take? Students should really take a practice test to determine it. So maybe your student will receive their PSAT results and then decide to take a practice ACT on the ACT.org website in order to compare those scores using a comparison chart that they can find online. And then feeling like one might be stronger than the other, they can then continue to do their preparation activities in that one section or the other, or in that one test or the other, sorry. And so I've seen students take a lot of different tests because they don't know what they want to do. I've seen students only take one of these once. There's no kind of perfect formula, especially right now when access to standardized testing looks a little bit different. Some resources that we have here. Oh, Mr. Olcott, are you popping in now? Sorry, I've lost track.
Yeah, it's all good. Slide 7. So there are definitely resources for these tests that can be useful for your students. One of the fantastic ones is Khan Academy, that's paired with College Board. And if your student is taking a PSAT or SAT, they have their College Board. Within that account, after they take a test, Khan Academy can be used to provide help and tutoring in a way and resources for your student. So based on how your student does on the PSAT or SAT, College or Khan Academy actually puts together a program, if you will, that will help your student identify and access resources to help them with parts they might want to improve on that test. So it's a fantastic free resource that all of your students have access to. Again, with ACT, they have ACT Academy. Very similarly, they provide free tutoring and practice tests all online for your students. Fairtest.org is another great resource that we have access to that identifies schools that are either test optional or test flexible. And what that means is that these are schools, a group of schools, there's a lot of them, who put less emphasis on standardized testing when they're making their admission decisions. So if your student has apprehension or hesitation to submit their test scores or even take a test, fairtest.org can be used to identify schools that won't take away from that. There are schools that will look at their applications more holistically and less based on standardized tests. I think now we're going to open up chat window.
Okay, I just opened the chat window up.
Perfect.
So we're good with that. So parents, you can go ahead and type in any questions that you have. And I am going to be the person in charge of reading the questions. And then we will just answer them as a team.
Great. I also want to acknowledge again that we'll answer questions to the best of our ability, but there are a lot of unknowns for the class of 2022. But I will say, I think test optional is a gift, and it's the gift to the seniors, and I have a feeling that it'll remain for many schools for the juniors as well.
All right, it looks like Debbie and Mark had basically the same question. How does superscoring work for the ACT, which appears to have many more sections than the SAT?
Yeah, this is a really great question. So if there are multiple sections on the ACT and a student is scoring higher in some of those sections, the colleges will consider the highest of those sections and to make a brand new kind of composite score for that student. And so there are calculators online. It's not as straightforward as the SAT super scoring. So I would recommend a student take a online ACT composite score calculator to plug in their different scores to see what the college would be calculating for that student to give them credit for their highest ACT sections.
Can I add to that as well? This past year, the ACT also added the opportunity for students if they just wanted to retake certain sections of the ACT. And so if your child takes the ACT once and feels like, oh, I just want to retake this one particular section, they can go on to the ACT and look into the registration options for that.
Okay, can you guys hear me? Is my audio coming through all right?
I think you sound great.
Okay, good. All right, good. Thank you. Okay, the next question was, will we post this on the McLean website? Were we going to email it to the parents or post it? I wasn't sure what we were going to do with that.
We're going to post this entire recorded session onto the McLean Programs and Presentations website. And I'll also include that link in the newsletter next week.
Perfect. Next question, do you have access to the PSAT results? And would they have a follow-up section to understand what they have wrong?
I'll take that. I actually was just texting with Miss Wheeler, who manages the PSAT, and she says that results will come out in mid-January. And so once a student receives their results, they can access their what they need improvement on, and helpful free resources on the College Board website.
And I'll add to that as well, just because I mentioned my daughter's a junior too, and Mr. Olcott also mentioned the resources through Khan Academy, and one thing that was great with that was when my daughter matched her PSAT scores through College Board with Khan Academy was able to look at the questions that she did not get right, and then she was able to kind of figure out, what the right answer was, and use the Khan Academy resources to figure out how to make that the correct answer.
Oh, that's interesting. I did not know that. Thank you, Tara. Next question. What is a good timeline for juniors to target their test taking for college applications?
I can hop on that one. So in a normal world, prior to all this, we really encourage our students to, as much as they can, have their testing done before the senior year starts. Senior year, you have college applications. Oftentimes, students really ramp up the rigor of their classes. So fall of senior year tends to be extremely busy. So if at all possible, many students who typically take their final SAT in the fall and the August window, but as much as possible, we have our students done with their testing prior to senior year, because year in, year out, you say how they just underestimate how much time college applications take combined with the classes they're taking. So as much as possible, again, just try to take as much off seniors' plates.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Alcott. Next, can you repeat the info about the calculator? I think that was you talking about the calculator, Laura.
Yes, and I pasted a helpful link. Also on the link, it's more simple than I thought. You just average the scores, the top scores by 4. I still, though, with rounding, I would want to find an online calculator, use a calculator just to be extra sure. What you don't want to do is falsely report, because ultimately the schools will want official score reports at a certain point in time, even if they ask students to self-report. And so, but anyway, the link in the chat is for the ACT.org calculating tool.
Next question, will McLean High School open for students to take the SAT in March 2021?
I don't know. Will it?
I know. I was going to say the same thing. I don't think we know. I haven't heard anything about that. I don't know. We didn't know about the senior. Oh, we didn't know about the seniors getting the SAT until like 6 weeks before this year. So if it does happen, we won't know too far in advance. So I would encourage your student to sign up for a test in the spring, just because we don't know what's going to happen.
I agree. Okay. Signing up for a test in the spring, but not being so devastated if it's canceled. We've had a lot of students take really expensive prep classes only to have their test canceled over and over again. And so we just want to strike a balance between, how do we handle disappointment when something doesn't go our way? And is this a crisis, or was it a crisis that actually caused this to happen, and this is not that big of a deal? And so we try to maintain like a stress-less approach to the testing as well, and preparation. But we usually won't know until we get an email from Dr. Riley exactly like a few weeks in advance.
Next, if a student is thinking of pursuing studies in science, is the ACT preferred?
I'll take that. So it really doesn't matter. if your student takes a practice ACT and a practice and the PSAT and prefers the ACT, fine. If they prefer the SAT, they shouldn't feel like they're restricted because of their interest in science. So there's no correlation. As you get into more highly selective college admissions, they might want a SAT subject test in the sciences if that student is going into a science or a STEM field. But again, this year we were also seeing that that drop off as well. And so it's really going to depend. And SAT subject tests are short tests that students have to sign up to take, and they get an SAT score out of 800 for that test, and it can be helpful and sometimes required. But again, we're not seeing them required this year as much.
I just want to add something kind of general in here. You know, this does not have to be a super stressful process. Even though there's so many things that we don't know, what we can control is, you know, having your child look at their PSAT score, see how they felt taking the PSAT, sign up to take either the SAT or the ACT, and just kind of and see what happens. You know, we don't know what's going to happen in the spring, so a lot of this is not under our control, which makes it hard. But just think of the things you can control. You know, have them sign up for at least one test in the spring. Are there any official SAT? Okay, Anne asked the same question that we had earlier, so we don't know about any SAT tests at McLean in the future at this point. Can you sign up now for testing in the spring? Yes, I believe that you can, right, everybody?
Yes, and can I also add something, Kathleen, too, in terms of just your point about what we can control and the stress. I know that also just planning ahead can take a lot of that stress off of your child. And so, for example, if you already know now that they're going to register for the March or the, you know, one of the spring tests, whether it's the SAT or the ACT, just helping them come up with a plan leading up to the test. And I think that the more prepared that they feel, the more practice tests that they might take ahead of time, the more, you know, resources that they take advantage of for the test will definitely take a lot of that stress and the unknown, you know, away and make everybody feel better.
Thank you, Tara. That's an excellent point. I love that in terms of planning, right? Just even write it down, like on your calendar. This is when your student can write down, this is when I'm taking the SAT, or this is when I'm taking the ACT. This is when I get my PSAT scores back, just to kind of have a vision for what's going to be happening. That's very helpful. Okay, can you sign up? Okay, yes, I answered that one. Are there any time restrictions between two SAT, ACT tests in terms of super scoring?
No, so yes, I think it's like 5 years, but for the practicality of this group, that's not something you should be concerned about. I wanted to add about signing up for testing in the spring. So when you sign up for a SAT, you would use the College Board website that Ms. Lodwig put in the chat. And when you're signing up for the ACT, you would use the ACT website that is also in the chat. And if McLean offers a special SAT that is a school day SAT, that sign-up process would be just through however McLean says you're supposed to do it. And so it's right now, what you'll see on the College Board website is that you'll see maybe in March other high schools hosting it. Maybe they're a few miles away. Maybe you're driving 45 minutes. I don't know. But if you're not seeing McLean on there, that means McLean is currently not hosting it, which is what we've heard. We are currently not on the schedule to host an SAT in the near future. However, just like we had the PSAT recently, and we hosted a SAT only for seniors recently as well. Yeah, I could see that happening if it's planned and it can happen safely. We had so many teacher volunteers happy to help, and we understand that this is really important to our students. So check your email in the same way you knew about this session. You're checking your email. You're encouraging your junior to check their fcpsschools.net email as well, because they'll be receiving that really important information that way.
I also want to add, when you're looking on the College Board website, those are the tests that are going to be on a Saturday at a high school, but it's not presented by the high school necessarily. It's presented by College Board, and they hire people to do the testing, but it's at the high school. Like the PSAT that we gave at McLean was actually hosted by McLean and proctored by McLean teachers during the school week. So we know for sure that there are going to be SATs at other high schools on Saturdays, just like in normal times there always have been. But again, we're not sure if any are going to be specifically hosted like during the school week through McLean High School using our teachers as proctors. Okay, we talked about how we sign up. Yes, register. Yep. Okay, so I guess those were all the questions people were asking about signing up. I don't see any other questions right now. Anyone else have any other questions that have not been answered yet?
I know, Ms. O'Tall, there were a couple questions that were sent in ahead of time through the Google form. And I'm just thinking, one of them was, and I don't think we addressed it during this presentation, was regarding, I'm drawing a blank now all of a sudden. If your student has accommodations or wants accommodations, for example, if your student has an IEP or 504 plan within the classroom at McLean and might need similar type of accommodations for testing for the SAT or ACT, please reach out to your child's school counselor, and we can give you the paperwork, or to your child's case manager. We can give you the paperwork that is necessary to submit prior to the testing of that, so that it can get approved, because that is something that we don't approve on the McLean High School side. It is approved directly from College Board and ACT. And then the other question that I do remember that somebody else asked that we haven't addressed is whether or not the ACTs or the SATs are needed for the community college. And because Northern Virginia Community College is an open enrollment school, it does not require the SAT or the ACT in order to be accepted at that school. Now, if your child does have an SAT score, for example, then they may be able to use that in terms of placement purposes.
Okay, then someone asked, can you say more about the SAT subject tests?
I would love to do that. You're right. I talked a little bit about that, but I didn't go deep on it. And I think the reason I didn't go deep on SAT subject tests is because our current seniors really didn't have an opportunity to take them en masse. And also colleges were really dropping that portion of their applications. And I guess I hope that it'll stay that way, but I will go a little deeper on SAT subject tests. So there are some schools, and these are highly competitive colleges and universities or competitive programs within universities, that would like as much data as possible to help them figure out the best fit students for their programs. And so in addition to an SAT or an ACT score, they'd also like to see SAT subject test scores. And so I think it's just an hour. It's an hour-long test that a student would take during the SAT test day. So they'd already have probably taken their SAT and ACT, and then they sign up for an extra seating and they go and sit for a subject test or 2 or 3. And those scores are out of 800. And typically, if your SAT subject test is very, very high and a score is requiring it, you would submit that score. I want to read from Georgetown's admissions website, their policy this year. Georgetown is one of those schools that highly recommended SAT subject tests in the past. And this year, they say, we understand the inability of students to take these additional tests due to COVID-19, We recommend that students who have completed the SAT subject test to send their scores. If not, and if they have AP test scores that they'd like to send, they could send those instead, or neither if they don't have them at all. And so when I read that, what I understand, and in this case it's Georgetown, but what I understand is Georgetown wants students to send everything that they have, and then Georgetown can decide what they're going to use for their analysis of that applicant. And so, and every college is going to be very, very different. And almost all colleges do not require subject tests, and certainly don't strongly recommend them. In this case, they're recommended, although there's a pass for the current seniors. I would guess that would extend to the current juniors if our testing environment still stays the same. So yes, there are a variety of subjects. You can go on the College Board website. You can just Google SAT subject test to see what the subjects are. We don't recommend students just randomly take SAT subject tests. If they are starting to put a list of colleges together that they're interested in, and during their thoughtful research discover that that college is asking for subject tests, that is when they would start researching those. And typically, if a student is interested in an engineering college, that engineering college will say, we want a math subject test and we want a science subject test. And so there's going to be more advice as students get deeper and deeper into their college search about what they should be doing.
All right, next question. Will the PSAT be offered to the sophomores? I don't think so. I'm pretty sure not. There's always a chance that it would be, but I doubt it. Is optional truly optional? Laura is asking the golden question. This is the one we hear so frequently, and Laura has sat in on so many admissions discussing this, so I'm going to let her take this one again.
Yeah, optional is optional with regards to test choice. And we are recommending current seniors to apply to a college test optional without scores if their scores are not in keeping with that specific college's averages. And so, for example, if they're applying to a specific college and that college has readily accessible data both on Naviance and national data, and the student's SAT score is below average, I would recommend that student apply test optional. And if that student's SAT score is average or above average, then I would say go for it. And ultimately, it's up to the student of whether they feel like their test score that they have is in keeping with their academic profile and how they feel. So their test score might be fine, but they might feel like they really could have done better and they don't love their score, they don't want to submit it, then I absolutely respect that choice. And so optional is really optional, especially this year, and I hope that extends to next year as well.
Can every SAT, ACT a student takes be seen by colleges? No. We mentioned that at the beginning that the student has total control over which scores they want to send and to what schools, unless at the beginning of the test they indicate they want to send the score to specific schools. But we don't recommend that they do that. Students should wait until after their test scores come back, and then they need to send their scores. That doesn't happen through McLean. That doesn't happen through the college. The student goes in and picks the score or scores that they want to send and where to send them. Okay.
Yes, and just like everything in this process, it costs money to send scores. And so a lot of colleges recognize that and allow students to self-report their scores. And so a student would write or input their test scores into the application. But kind of like online shopping, if a student is on the College Board website, they have to select which scores they want to order to send to their colleges.
How many SAT subject tests do college admissions usually require?
usually none. So sometimes 2. But again, this year, I haven't seen any schools requiring SAT subject tests this year.
Okay. At what point, maybe you can pinpoint the month, might the class of 2022 know how colleges are weighing standardized tests in terms of acceptance?
We won't know that ever because what we won't be able to firmly know. Here's what happens when our current seniors are getting ready to graduate. We survey every single one of them and we say, okay, here's where you applied, where did you get in, and where are you going? And part of that is so we send their final transcript, and also part of that is so the Naviance scattergrams can be updated. But we won't know whether students were applying test optional or not. And while we all have really great relationships with our college admissions representatives, I don't think that we'll ever have a full picture in a universal kind of way of how standardized test scores factored into admissions for this year.
Yes, and again, that's just something that we can't control. So trying to figure out when, why, how, that kind of stuff is going to add stress to an already stressful process. So let's just, schedule a time for your child to take a test. Your child should actually be the one scheduling it. Remember, this is their process. Again, we try to remind parents of that many times, that this is your child's process, so they should be the ones going into the collegeboard.org and registering for the test themselves. It does take a while to register for these tests because there's a lot of information, but they should be the one registering for those, not their parents. Yeah, we're not going to know a lot of those answers, and it's just hard. It's just, that's the pandemic for you, Okay, you said earlier that a school may want to see all tests. That would be ACT and SAT, not all the SATs that have been taken. In other words, is it safe to have a not so good score early on and improve it later?
So I know it's easier said than done, like try not to worry about it. What is safe is to not over-test, and for a student to feel prepared going into their test, that they gave it their best shot, and that they're applying to appropriate schools. And so if a student is applying to an appropriate school for them, they'll either feel good about their standardized test scores and submit them, or they won't, and they won't submit them. But if they're applying to a school that is saying they want to see all the test scores, then that student has to trust that the college will understand the narrative of started off low, worked our way up. You have to trust that. And I know that that's hard, but that is and it's very few colleges that are asking this, but the college wants to see the whole testing narrative so that they can make a determination.
Right. Most schools it won't require that. And by the time they're applying to colleges next fall, they should have a couple of scores, even one score if they did really well and they're happy with it, but 1 or 2 scores to choose from or not choose to send the scores. And, they can submit it just a couple weeks before their application is due, and it should be fine. So they should be able to kind of have a choice at that point and not have to send a score that they don't like. Again, like Laura said, it would probably be, I'm either going to send this or I'm not going to send this, not, I'm going to send this later. And yeah, we don't want them taking so many tests. Okay, thank you for your work. Oh, you're welcome. This is so helpful to hear from parents who are overseas and have not done these tests themselves. Yes, for parents who are overseas or are, haven't grown up in the United States, this process, it's overwhelming enough for those of us who grew up here and know the process. But for somebody who's never been familiar with it, we are here to help you through all of this for sure. Yeah, definitely overwhelming. And that looks like that was our last question for now.
I just want to just sort of echo what Ms. O'Tall just said. Crazy phenomenal wealth of resources, and never, ever, ever hesitate to reach out to your students. She has a whole wealth of experience and knowledge, sort of from the other side of the. So please never. We're here for y'all. We're here for your students at all times.
Thank you for coming, everyone.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add, just to let you know, in the future for future Parent University programs, that we will have other topics for college research, college application process, and Ms. Venice also helps coordinate the different parent program evening nights. One that is coming up this coming Wednesday, right, Ms. Venice?
Yes, Wednesday evening at 6:30 p.m. We will be having our fall college planning night. It's a college admissions panel. And again, you're here today, you're checking your email. If you keep checking your email, you won't miss anything. And please encourage your students to check their email as well. You can tell them email's not going anywhere. Not until they're in charge of everything. So, but yes, we're bringing you lots of programs, and we know it can be overload, but we're hoping that the more information we give to you, just like Tara said, the less stress we all have. So, thank you so much for coming.
Hi, everyone.